Hello, welcome to CarCast. I'm Matt, the moderator. Deandria Goldberg is out today. We got Brad Fanshaw with us from Shift and Steer.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
Doing okay. Just realized my ring light wasn't on though, And I mean, I'm in the shadows.
Yeah. Well, yeah, get it on. We're gonna post this. We're gonna put this all up on YouTube. All right. While
Oh,
you fuss around with the light, I am gonna tell you guys about our friends at Bet Online. They're the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to the NHL and UFC. BetOnline continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with the odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. Speaking of games, I don't know if you've been following this, but Goldberg is coming back for basically one match in the WWE. He always kind of felt like he did retire from wrestling the way he wanted to. So he wants to have, a big match and on his kind of his home turf and kind of do it the way he wanted and was able to put together a deal and make that happen. But the prep for it is the big thing, right? First of all, we're like, hey, listen, Tyson's 58 and he just fought. I don't know if that fight was rigged or not, but he certainly got in good shape for it. And
yeah, he was ripped.
and in December, Goldberg turned 58, and he's like, "Okay, I'm ready to do it." But the beating he's taken over the years, like he's still a big guy, but I think with his right arm, he he couldn't raise his right arm above his head, and now he's doing like shoulder raises with a
Hmm.
5 pound weight
Yeah.
to get to the point, and now he's supposed to go lift people up in the air or 260-pound people. So he's starting with 5 pounds. Uh,
I went through that. I mean, it's miserable. I seriously did. I had a time when I could not raise my hand any farther than that, just like perpendicular to my shoulder. And I had to do the same thing, use a really light weight
yeah.
and just keep stretching a little more, a little more. And I don't know whatever caused it, but it's miserable. You can't even order a beer at a bar if you can't raise your hand that
Yeah, you
high.
can't bid on a car at Barrett Jackson. You got your Barrett.
No, no.
So he's in Colombia this week for the stem cell therapy, which we got into a couple of weeks ago, and they start by doing these MRIs to find all of your damaged areas, right? Like is your shoulder torn, knees are messed up, whatever, and then they they inject new cells in there, and it's supposed to help the healing process. Like when you're done, you're supposed to immediately feel the difference. And a couple of other wrestlers, guys that are friends of his, have been doing it. Kevin Nash did it, and he was really banged up, and he could finally move around. And so Bill's out there in Colombia getting this. And first of all, he hates needles, so already, but
Well,
what I
then
realize is,
he's in hell then.
so what he was saying was the prep for it though is because I guess they take cells from you and they put it in this machine and then that's what they put back in. So they don't
Right.
want to take out junk cells for lack of better term, right? So they told them like you have to clean everything up. Like you, they don't want you to have caffeine. You can't smoke. You can't drink. He's been dip. He puts that dip in his lip for 30 years and he can't do any of
Wow.
that.
Yeah, so
He has to be super
he's on a
clean.
cleanse.
Yeah, can't smoke anything, cigarettes, weed, or anything, drink or anything. You're not supposed to have any caffeine. I think he might have snuck in a few cups of coffee, but what he realized was he was like 5 weeks into being super clean, and he's like, that alone was just night and day difference. Like even on the last podcast, he had so much more energy. He was lifting more weight. He was way more, he was like running around the house and getting stuff done that he was procrastinating on and annoying Wanda to no end, just like getting up at 5, like, what are we doing? What are we doing? And he's like already just from that. So now I told him, I was like, listen, I don't know when you're wrestling, but you're going to go, you're going to do all this work, get clean, eat clean, do the stem cell therapy. I was like, but don't come back and trash it all. Like,
Yeah.
like just start dipping and smoking weed and drinking booze and start going like damaging all the new cells. And he's like, I know it's going to be tough, but yeah. Anyway, he's feeling good, but it's super interesting process, and I can't wait to talk to him when he gets back. Like, how was the whole thing? Like, was it scary? Was it painful? Did it work? Were you comfortable? Like, how was the facility? Do you notice a difference? Just like the whole thing. And you know, Bill, he'll be brutally honest with the whole thing. He'll just say, it was good, or he'll say, I'll never do that again. I'm just like, it was terrible. I'll never do that again. He will not, he will not,
You won't pull any
he
punches,
will not pull any punches for sure. But
so to speak.
anyway, so looking forward to getting into that to kind of see
Isn't
if,
that amazing though? He's got to go clear to Colombia. It's something that you used to be able to get here. I think it was the Bush administration who outlawed the stem cell therapy here in America. It's
so
crazy.
I believe there's a version of it here, but it's it's nowhere near like what you can do in other countries. And the reason why he's going to Colombia specifically is just because that's where some of his buddies went and they walked him through the experience. And some of the guys have videos up about it.
And
And
they made it back.
yeah, they made it back. I think Kevin Nash has gone twice. You know, and Bill's talked to him a lot about it. He was just like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do the needles. Kevin's like, you got to do it. It's life
Yeah.
changing. You got to do it. He's like, I couldn't walk a minute ago. He's like, now I feel better. So, uh, yeah, should be just be
Well,
kind of
good for
interesting.
him.
Yeah,
He'll be back. He'll be ripped. He'll be big.
he's
He'll
he's
be able to move.
he's getting into it. He's in the gym. He wants to put on a good show.
So
It's
you're saying I could have gone to Colombia and not had to lift that 5 pound weight for a year just to get my arm up like that?
right, except Bill wrestled guys for 30 years and played
Yeah.
football, and that's how you probably tore yours or hurt yours by sleeping on it. So,
No, I think it was reaching to the top shelf for some good liquor, and just reached a little too heavy a bottle at a wrong angle,
yeah, Brad had a
or sleeping on it.
he had a drinking casualty injury. All right,
Fell off a bar stool.
fell off a bar stool. Amelia Island. No, sorry, not Amelia's coming up, right? Amelia's coming
Yes.
up in about a month or so. They've got the auction going up there, but I don't know if you heard about the Paris auction that RM had just done
Yes, I
with
saw some of the
the
details on it.
Ferrari 250 LM that went up for auction. Now, other than like a 250 GT, this was the most expensive price at auction for a Ferrari. I believe it was 36.3 million dollars sold for the Ferrari. But this was a privateer car. This is one of the NART cars that Giannetti brought here, if you remember that. If you guys are familiar with that story. And it was the last Ferrari to win Le Mans overall kind of back in the day. I think they did
Oh,
it again
really?
in like
Okay. I didn't know
2023.
that.
And it wasn't a factory car. It had factory support, but it but it wasn't factory ran. So it
Yeah,
was one of the
basically they would go to the factory, they would say, I want to buy the car. The factory would semi-support them while they campaigned it.
Yeah, so Chinetti worked for Ferrari, raced for Ferrari, and then came here and said, I want to be the importer of Ferrari, and
Yes.
opened the dealer in New York, which I think eventually went to Connecticut, and became the first importer of Ferrari street cars here. And then created the NART, which was the North American racing team for Ferrari, got Ferrari support. Obviously, he could just call at the time, could call Enzo and go, I need this, I need that. We're tuning the engine, doing whatever, and was winning races. And I think they campaigned 6 cars. This was the last. I think it was the sixth of that run and the last to win overall. So impressive car. Let's see if I got it here. I'll share it for the YouTube
Impressive
guys.
price.
Yeah. So 36.3 million. The
It's a
250
good looking
LM.
car too.
Yeah, it's a cool looking piece. The
Yeah.
LM cars had like the funky back to it. You know, definitely a cool piece. Tons of money, a lot of history, kind of a record here for Ferrari. And then I think that was it. They were done with winning Le Mans until 2023 or something.
Yeah, there was a huge dry spell there, but these particular cars were really sexy. I mean, those bulgy fenders and the small rear window they kept the cockpit look, and then those two induction scoops. They're good looking cars.
Yeah. Little
I
tight
was,
on the inside.
yeah, and I was never a big fan of the what I call the chicken coop rear, the cross, the grill on it looked like
Yeah,
something out
like
of
the
a
chicken
chicken coop.
wire. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But, it was functional and it did what they needed to do.
It's basically just to keep out a minimum amount of debris because the air is just
Yeah.
flowing through it, from those side scoops and just out the back, but without adding weight or anything. They just try to make it as light and as clean as possible. But um,
But when you
impressive
look at it
piece.
from that rear angle and it's just big bulgy fenders and the little bitty, roof line, it's very, very
And
appealing.
then after this is when Ford started dominating with the GT40s.
Right.
But anyway, I just wanted to bring this up. This is a cool car, cool piece,
Huge sale.
and it's like, do we see this car in Monterey? Do we see this car show up at Goodwood? Is someone going to put it on the track? It's a weird thing about the audience of these cars. The people that buy them, you're like, hey, this is $36.3 million. Maybe you should just put it in a big glass bubble that's fireproof and bulletproof and leave it there. But I've been to Goodwood. I've seen them run these cars. We talked to what's his name from Pink Floyd, Nick Mason,
Oh
and
yeah, Nick Mason. Yeah.
he had his 250 out there, and I think it was the
He didn't
250.
pay 36 million for his though.
No, no, no. We talked about it. We're like, we were doing the TV show. Adam and I were filming Going Racing with Adam Carolla in that show, and I
Hmm.
think Adam did the interview with him when I was there, uh, and so Nick Mason drives the car, and then he's got a driver, like a ringer race car guy, to go out there and do it as well. Which is, by the way, that's the greatest job in the world, right? Like you're like, hey, this is not my car, but I get to drive it. I think Nick Mason said, Adam's like, how much, when did you buy this car and how much did you pay? And I forgot exactly what it was, but it was like 1970 something and it was $40,000. It was just so much money back in the day. He's like,
There was a huge amount in that
yeah.
time,
Uh,
but
and he's like, it was such a big purchase, and I just kept it all this time. And I'm like, well, what's it worth now? 70 million? And he's like, maybe, but also it's
I
like, it's not like Nick Mason's in a rush to sell it. Like it's just going to be, I don't know if it's going to be handed down to the family or sent to a museum or whatever, but talk about a return on investment. Let's see Bitcoin do that.
yeah, I mean, if he would have put $40,000 in the bank, he wouldn't have had $70 million.
No, I mean,
That's for sure.
he had to wait 50 years, but Uh, but
Yeah, but that's the difference. He had to wait 50 years, but he got to enjoy the vehicle for all those years.
and he's racing
And
it.
yeah, and even if he didn't
Right.
race in it, sometimes we get enjoyment just from going out in our shop and looking at our cars, and bringing friends over and going, yeah, check that out.
I
And
I mean, it's Goodwood. So you go out in the morning, you do laps in your car, and then you're like, all right, I'm gonna go get a cocktail, and then you hand it over to your racing driver who's just
yeah,
there to just stretch the legs and show the car off some more, and you go have some lunch and some wine and enjoy the event. Did some laps in your car, and then you get to see your car out there with somebody else.
well, you asked the question. I wonder if we'll see it at Goodwood, or it really depends, as you know, Matt, the person who owns it, because there are the people that want to get it out, have it, and they want to stand around and have their buddies come up and go, oh my gosh, you paid 36 million for that. And then there's the ones who just want to squirrel it away in their collection and only have a few friends come over, I mean, and then there's the guys who buy it so they can go take it out and rip it around the track. It's three distinctly different individuals.
Yeah, totally. But recently, though, that wasn't the most expensive car to sell, and so there was a '54
I was
Mercedes-Benz.
going to say the Mercedes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the 196R. It's basically a Streamliner. It has like the Streamliner body on it. Um, I think Sterling Moss had raced the car. This car sold for, I'll bring it up for the YouTube channel again, but I think it was about 54, 56 million. I forgot what the exact conversion is on it, but it was 51 million euros. But this is a cool looking car. I mean,
It's gorgeous.
I
It's
mean,
beautiful.
they knew about aerodynamics from aerospace, but didn't really have like the software that we have today and the wind tunnels. So this is just a designer's interpretation of what aerodynamic is, just putting pen to paper, you know.
Right.
And look how cool looking this car is. Look how gorgeous this car is.
Mm.
So here we're looking at this image, by the way, of which looks like an open wheel car, just a single seat, sit in the middle, little tiny, 3-inch tall windscreen, open wheel, open cockpit. But this is a 196R before the Streamliner Coachworks body put on it. So this little,
Dramatically different.
yeah, this little like go-kart buggy looking thing became this gorgeous car, with the swoopy fenders and just it didn't need lights or anything on it. I guess it just didn't, you know, wasn't racing the endurance race. Like I don't know how they,
Yeah, that's true. Maybe it had something down in the grill or something
or
during the
maybe they
race.
add stuff to it for the race.
Yeah, for endurance races.
Yeah.
But now, is this a car that they actually got to take home, or is this one of those where it has to reside at the Mercedes Museum like that previous one they sold?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I'm pretty sure you get to take this one home. So both of these cars, if I remember correctly, this is kind of interesting. Both of these cars were from the Indianapolis Motor Museum. They've had it for the longest time. They're doing like $100 million renovation on the museum. And they're like, so we should liquidate a few of our big money cars. But it turns out they only needed to sell, I guess, two of them because they've had them in the collection for like 30 years. And here we are, we're, I don't know, 75 million, almost $80 million into these two cars alone, and they're doing something like an 80 or to $100 million renovation on the museum. So looks like they're almost there.
See, Matt, we screwed up when we were like 25. We should have started a car museum, and solicited, donations of old race cars, Ferraris, things like that, and then just housed them for years, let people come in and look at them. And then right now we could just be going, hey, we're going to have to liquidate some of these cars.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's,
And but the museum is a nonprofit. So I mean, I don't know what the administration team pays himself over there,
but
but this is
yeah,
a pretty
I mean,
well-funded
we've got to have
museum
a
now.
salary at our car museum. Maybe we should start one now. We're accepting solicitations.
The Peterson went through this as well. They did a bunch of fundraising when they renovated their museum. That was another like
Hmm.
$100 million project, and they sold off cars as well. Uh, and
Cars do.
yeah,
I mean, they do it from time to time. There's always a turn at a museum. You can't if for generations you have the same exact cars sitting in the same place. It's not much of a museum. So they have to turn them.
right. And some that get donated are donated to help fund the museum, like
True.
like this. So they get donated and sometimes they just get sold right away, or they're donated, they're put on display, they're documented, they're part of the exhibit for a certain amount of years, maybe on and off, and then they get sold off like these cars. And there are some that won't get sold. For the Peterson, the Steve McQueen Jaguar XKSS, I don't think that's ever getting sold.
No, no, that shouldn't get sold. But on the same, my friend Barry Weiss, who was a star on Storage Wars, he bought a car at the when Peterson sold a bunch of their cars called Scrape, which was
Yep.
a very famous hot rod, and he made it look even better because he painted it black. It was like purple when he bought it.
Yeah.
But that was a car that was acquired by the Peterson Museum. At one point, they sold it. He bought it. He loves having it in his collection, and the Peterson benefited from the results of the sales. So, it happens.
Yeah. Okay. All right, let's just take a quick break and then we'll be right back. Okay, so I'm looking at the office here, which I see quite a bit when we're on when we're on Zoom doing all the various podcasts. And you've got one of the bike frames back there, one of your BMX bikes
Right there.
right there.
That is a torquer.
Okay. For those that don't know, let's go back a few years, maybe a couple dozen,
Few decades.
a few decades, about how you were involved with BMX, because you've got some new stuff that you're working on now that we'll talk about in
Yeah.
a second. But before Bond Speed Wheels, before Boyd Coddington Garage, before any of that, uh, you were on two wheels with human power.
Yeah, yeah. No, I started racing BMX and got involved in it really early. And where I always say that it is direct correlation to the automotive world is bikes were the first thing that you got to customize. You got to race.
Yeah.
And BMX was a place where we built custom bikes. We raced. We had really cool parts we could acquire for them. And when you get out to the track, people like the Mears brothers, the Indy racers, they were out there with their kids racing.
Yeah.
There were a lot of racing and hot rod people out there, and that was cool. But I raced BMX, then I started racing pro, and I raced pro for a number of years. I was never one of the top level pros. I think the highest I ever got was 15th in the nation or whatever. But I went another route, and I had been studying advertising marketing in college, and I wanted to work for a magazine. And I was in my last year of college when the American Bicycle Association called me and asked me if I would be interested in being the editor of their national magazine called Bicycles and Dirt. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. I could start in the mailroom somewhere and work my
Yeah.
way up over a decade, or just go right in as the editor. So I took it and worked there for a number of years, edited several of their magazines, and then eventually became the vice president of the company, running the businesses, doing everything from building tracks and front loaders to
Yeah.
running the business and getting sponsors and stuff like that. And then that led to Vision Streetwear, which at Vision we manufactured skateboards, snowboards, but we were also in all types of action sports. And BMX, of course, was one. We sponsored all the top pro racers, all the top pro events, and put on our own freestyle events, which were, BMX freestyle half pipe and stuff, which was pretty cool.
It's interesting to think back that a company like Vision was at so many of those events and so much activation, event activation. They were kind of the Monster and Red Bull before Monster and Red Bull.
Well, we always say that we originated the X Games because the X Games took our platforms that we did. Because what we did, Matt, was we would go to like Bren Center at the UCI, University of California, Irvine, a huge auditorium. We would build a half pipe in there. We would put on a 2-day show that culminated with the top pro skateboarders, or if it was a BMX event, the top, pro BMX half pipe riders. But then it would all culminate. And like one year, I had the Red Hot Chili Peppers play on the half pipe with the guys skateboarding behind them. And so we put on shows. They weren't just competitions. Then we would go up to all of the big ski resorts, and with our snowboarding, like we would do the Vision Pro in the snow. And what was different is I had a production company, and we would produce the event, but we would also produce it for television. And we would have, basically the best thing in the world because we're the promoters of the event. All the other companies would come in with their top pro snowboarders, but the announcers would all be wearing Vision Streetwear, talking, doing the color commentary, and we would package that all as a TV show. We would go to ESPN, and back in the day, you could do what was called barter TV, where we would bring them a prepackaged show called the Vision Pro in the Snow. We would get 50% of the commercials. ESPN would get 50% of the commercials, and they would air it in prime time. They would sell their spots, but we would have our guys in the competition.
Yeah.
We would have the announcers wearing our clothing, and we would have commercials in the show. So it was a pretty cool time.
Right. How long were you at Vision? Did you go to Boyd's after that?
Yeah, Vision, we grew like a weed. I came in there, and my buddy who started it, it was already a $10 million a year company when I came there, and I was there 5 years, and we together grew it from that to 130 million in sales in just 5 years, and it was nuts.
Yeah.
And then we sold the company, and I was real young. I was still in my 20s, and it was like, what do I do now? And I was a car guy, and I went up to Boyd's to inquire about maybe a hot rod, and I got up there. We started talking, and what was funny was Boyd wanted to start a surfwear line, and I said, "What are you talking about, a surfwear line?" And he goes, "Well, I see stuff like the company you had and how it grows." I go, "No, no, 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 no." I said, "Focus," and so we talked, and we literally did a handshake deal, become partners over a dumpster. We were leaning on a dumpster. I can remember it, and we did it. And when I joined Boyd's, he had just completed Cadzilla, the world famous ZZ Top Cadzilla. And I knew that what they were building there and the wheels that were just starting to come out, he had the tiger by the tail. We just had to, make it happen. So I jumped in there. Then I went in and looked at the financials of the company to see what it was doing. And like the entire company, wheels and hot rods and everything, was doing like $500,000 a year.
Right.
Now this was in the 80s, the late 80s. And 5 years later, we had it up to 40 million, and I took it public on NASDAQ. And that was, in the meantime, we made, the Boyd name famous, Boyd famous. We got on the cover of Smithsonian with the only hot rod that's ever been on the cover of Smithsonian. We had a car at the New York Auto Show on the main turntable as you walked in the door. I mean, so many things that we broke the mold. And what I really did was I took everything that we did in action sports and I just reinvented it in the hot rod and automotive aftermarket.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And but selling a different product. I mean, people weren't
Oh,
building
way different.
$1 million hot rods back then. I mean, so I'm sure like the margins were different and you know, certainly and a not a high volume product, not like skateboards or bicycles or even the clothing from Vision.
Well, and that's where the wheels were so important. And the other, people ask me all the time, they go, how, hot rod builders, they go, how did you grow that company so fast? We barely, can build enough hot rods to pay the bills. And I say, hot rods are your marketing tool.
Yeah.
The products are what you have. And it's funny, I just had this conversation at the Grand National Roadster Show with a guy. And he said, you told me that once, and I did it, and I said, well, good. I'm glad I could help because, we had car care, we had apparel, we had the wheels at Boyd's, but then I also did a huge licensing program where we did testers model cars, we did Mead school folders, and the methodology was just that we wanted to take and have every kid grow up knowing the Boyd name so that later in life they would want the Boyd, and it worked. It worked really well.
Yeah. All right. So bringing back the BMX stuff, there's this resurgence of, like we see with cars and stuff as well. Certainly all the auctions we've gone to of collectability. And you're right, not just the factory bikes, but the mods we do for bikes, how those things are becoming valuable, the parts, certainly NOS stuff.
Oh
Before
yeah.
Oakley was selling sunglasses and clothing, I had Oakley handle grips on my bike. You remember?
Yep.
And
Yep.
and talk about an evolution of a brand, how that sort of grew into that type of thing. But so what's happening in the BMX space?
The BMX space is doing just what muscle cars did, okay? Because there were those bikes that you couldn't afford to have or your parents couldn't afford to have for you when you were growing up. Or maybe there was something that you just never had a chance to get. So now as these people have grown, now their kids are away. Now there's the collectible market, and the collectible market for BMX is also being pushed because just like car shows, now there are these events like Dirty Fest, which is held every year in California. They build an old school BMX track, and you can go out any age. Young kids can go out, and grandpa can go out, and they can relive BMX. But at the same time, they have a bike show just like car shows where they're judged. They have classes. And you mentioned about like NOS. NOS parts are skyrocketing because there weren't that many. Because usually in something that's youth oriented, I mean, all of us car guys, we buy things, they get put on the shelf, and something never gets used or like that. But when you're a kid, you spend every bit of your available money and buy it. You rip it open right away and put it on. So the only NOS parts were usually a bike shop that left it in the back room or went out of business or something like that. And we're seeing bicycles that are restored and they're worth tens of thousands of dollars. And we're seeing some just like race cars that have that pedigree. Maybe they were raced by Stu Thompson or
Yeah.
or a Perry Kramer, and it's his bike that he won this event on. And if you can really nail it down to that is that bike, it becomes extremely valuable. And we're seeing that. I mean, I've got some bikes in my collection that are pretty valuable, but nothing that has that pedigree, unfortunately.
Are companies reproducing parts now, or are companies uh, that were, like we can open up a classic industries catalog and get
Right.
get repopped, lights and window trim and door handles and stuff. But some companies are also what we've seen in the automotive space. Some companies are even bringing back services like, Mercedes Classic Center or what Jaguar's doing with their thing, and even Porsche, right? Porsche over at Pecla, they do some vintage motorsports restoration stuff and over there. Well, what's going on in the aftermarket space? Is everything just eBay finds and garage sales and Craigslist,
No,
can you get repop parts?
no, you nailed it. That bike right over my shoulder, that is a repop torquer from the original manufacturer who had progressed into like frames that are all composite materials and super lightweight that Olympic champions would use. But they saw the people going, man, I wish I could get my old torquer, and there's just not that many of them. So they sent me that one, and I'm going to be building that up for an upcoming event. And it is has the geometry of a newer bike, but it looks just like the one that I had as a kid. Even the color, it's the same exact color. The decals are the same, but just like with an old muscle car that you'd put tubular A arms and things like
Yeah.
that to make it handle better, this has newer geometry to make it handle just that much better. And like you were saying, there are some guys that have gotten in to actually building bikes for people. They've got big cache of parts, or they know other people they can buy, sell, and trade with. And if you wanted the bike that you grew up with, let's say you're a freestyle guy and you wanted I had a Haro and it had this and that. That guy can build it, take some photos, and recreate your bike of your dreams. And then you pay a lot for it. And then there's other manufacturers jumping in. I mean, all the top brands from Hutch to Mongoose, everybody's doing retro frames,
Yeah.
forks, and there's even apparel and racing uniforms. I had kind of a laugh with a guy the other day. He goes, oh yeah, we're making a lot of our Max pants like we used to, our 09 racing pants. He goes, they're just larger than they used to be.
Yeah. We're all a little larger than we used to
Yeah,
be.
exactly.
Um, uh, what about so Vision Streetwear is still around. Obviously, you guys haven't been involved with the company in a long time. Who was the guy that started the company originally?
That was Brad Dorfman, another Brad, and
Yeah.
yeah, and he was one of the smartest guys I ever met, because if you think back in skateboarding, got started in the 60s and 70s, okay, or 60s, let's say. Brad was older than I am, and he was a participant in the 60s. And when skateboarding kind of fell out of favor and kind of dropped away, let's say, he was the smart guy, because what he did was, as the brands all kind of failed, he bought up the rights to them. So when it came back, he owned all the brands, and he became a distributor first, and all these famous brands that people wanted, he owned the rights to all of them, and that was how he started distributing. Then he started, because it started out as Vision Distribution, and then he went into his own brand. And the day he called me, he was like, dude, I just can't do this on my own. I need somebody else that has business ideas and like that. And do you want to move to California? And that was pretty much the conversation
Yeah.
that we had. So it was cool. It was cool.
Yeah. It'd be interesting. I don't know if he's still around or if you talk to him much, but
Every once in a while, yeah.
is there kind of a comeback? Is there?
Well, here's what's interesting. Brad still owns Vision skateboards, and he does repops of all our old decks.
Okay.
But Vision Streetwear, the apparel and the shoes, was sold to a New York company that owns probably 35 different brands. It's one of those big apparel groups where they
Yeah.
own all kinds of brands from like the 80s and the early 90s and like
Right.
that.
Okay. Yeah. Uh, all right. So, and now what are you working on? You brought out a new podcast. We talked a little bit about it on Shift and Steer. You're doing some YouTube stuff. Give us the details on that. What are you working on?
Well, the newest podcast is called Super Rad BMX, and it goes right into what we're talking about here. I saw this growing niche, and I wanted to do something that was a little bit more. So we did it on YouTube. It's more of a YouTube podcast show. Um, we still release it as an audio podcast, but it's really geared towards the visual because we do a lot of visuals with it, having a lot of B-roll and a lot of still frames and things like that. So when we interview someone, you can really get a visual with it. Because if we're talking about, let's take for instance Tracer Finn, who was a pro, and he's a great guy. He grew up in Vegas. His dad was the entertainer Mickey Finn, and Mickey Finn was a big Vegas entertainer. Well, one day at Union Plaza, they pulled out the piano out of Mickey's stage show and put it on the street right underneath the lighted headline that said Mickey Finn Show, and Tracer built a wooden jump and jumped it with all the tourists and everything watching, and it's like a really famous shot. Well, how do you talk about that in an interview without showing it?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
you're talking about the looks on people's eyes, and you're talking about the look on his face because he said he didn't realize how high he had to jump to clear his dad at the piano and everything. And he goes, when I did it, I realized how high I was, and I was landing on a flat cement sidewalk. And and so with those type of conversations, it's really great to have the visuals. So Super Rad BMX is doing that. We just dropped a brand new show that was one of the first ever. It's the ABSA, the American Bicycle Show Association. Had a big show here in Southern California, and they had a big convention center room full of show bikes, and it's everything from what I call the low riders of bikes, which are these cruiser bikes that are all engraved and gold plated, to restored BMX bikes, and we covered that. It's really fun because people are bringing another generation of kids out. The parents and the grandparents are bringing them out, and they can kind of talk about how pops used to race such and such a bike and see it. It's same conversations you hear at a car show.
Where's the podcast? Where do we find it on YouTube?
You can find it on our Radmatic channel. That's RADMATTIC. But if you just Google Super Rad BMX, it should also come up. But our channel is Radmatic because
Okay.
there is also on there some bike builds and restoration tips and things like that my co-host Tim does.
Okay. Here, so this is the channel. We're just taking a quick look at it right
Yeah.
now at Radmatic. And we can follow you guys on social media as well.
Yes, you can at Super Rad BMX on Instagram. And then if you don't have time for YouTube, you can just listen to Super Rad BMX everywhere that top podcasts are found.
All right, there you go. We're going to bring up the let's take a quick look at the
The fun thing about the BMX is that we're now in an era where kids can literally get college scholarships to be. Oh yeah, that's an old photo of me right there. That's Tim and I when we were kids. But and those are our torquers from back in the day. So you see the candy blue one that I'm sitting
Yeah.
on. That's like the one behind me. And but kids can actually get college scholarships to become BMX racers in the Olympics and like that now.
yeah.
So it's
All
come a
right. Well, listen,
long ways.
I appreciate it. I thought that was super interesting. That the BMX is making a big comeback, and there's just so many things that we were into as kids that have taken off. Radio controlled stuff,
Oh
for
yeah,
sure. The radio controlled
skateboards,
cars.
snowboards.
And yeah, like the BMX stuff, the snowboards, and the retro stuff. That's cool. Like it's funny how as we start to get older, we we look at the older stuff and go, that's got to be worth something, right? Almost everything
Right.
old is becomes collectible, uh, and like there's no reason why we won't see popular auctions. Maybe we're not going to have like a Barrett Jackson of BMX, but you're going to have probably some, if there's not already, some form of online auction stuff, like a bring a trailer or a,
Oh yeah,
cars and
something.
bids, for all of this stuff where it's going to start popping up, which is probably a smart idea. So,
Start collecting those bikes.
yeah, start collecting those bikes. All right, so Super Rad BMX, that's the podcast and the YouTube channel. You guys check that out. Of course, Bond Speed Wheels. Um, Still cranking away. Wheels, steering wheels, anything you need, custom.
That's right. Cars, trucks, exotics, Porsches, whatever you need. We make wheels for everything.
Throw in a couple
And they're all
EV.
made right here in the USA at our factory in Anaheim.
Yeah, so there's no tariffs.
No tariffs. And hopefully the aluminum prices stay down.
Yeah,
So
hopefully. Hopefully. Actually, there was a
most
big
of ours,
announcement from like Coca-Cola going, if we're going to keep doing this, we're going to see more plastic bottles and
yeah.
because they're going to have issues with aluminum
Well, we have a
glass
certain
finally.
cap, Matt, that we make that we used to get the bar stock from Canada, and that's been a problem to get just since the pandemic. I can't
Yeah.
imagine if we have tariffs and like that, what kind of stuff. So order your wheels now.
Yeah. What are your wheels now? All right, Brad. Thanks so much.
Hey,
Of
thank you.
course, Shift and Steer is the podcast as well. You can find that, subscribe to that if you guys don't know about that one already. But thanks. Until next time, keep the air in the spare and the bag in the wheel.